Hi everyone, welcome to your latest planning outlook that's updated on Friday the 13th of March. It's taking a bit of doing, but there's high pressure still on the horizon in the longer range forecast into next week. But still, for the time being, we've got some weather systems coming in from the Atlantic, and a sequence of freeze and thaw cycles on the mountains will take us through into the early days of the new week. You can see that on the temperature sequence, this at 850 millibars, which corresponding to about the highest tops in Scotland, or maybe just a bit higher up than that in the atmosphere once pressure begins to build next week. A warm sector moves through during the second half of Saturday, so temperatures will tend to rise even onwards into the evening, but a cold front will follow, and temperatures and freezing levels are back down again as we head onwards into Sunday. Winds turn briefly towards northwesterly, so much chillier air comes across the country through into the early part of Monday. A brief ridge of higher pressure is in, but then we're back to a southwesterly stream and temperatures will lift through Monday daytime, with once again something of a cold front trying to sink southwards around Tuesday, although in England and Wales most likely staying on the milder side, any chillier air confined towards the northern parts of Scotland. Indications, though, as we go onwards toward the later part of next week suggest that chillier air comes back down from the north, eventually pressure tending to build, but it could well be that high pressure builds within quite a chilly air mass, so most likely later next week things are on the cold side, sub-zero on many of the mountains. Charts for the next few days looking like this. For Saturday we have a weak front passing eastwards early in the day, and that will produce zones of hill snow and rain largely below around 600 or 700 metres, and a general mass of low cloud which will tend to break up a bit as the day goes on, but only all to be replaced by another weather system coming in off the Atlantic, and that will set in quite quickly across western hills in Scotland and across northwest England and across West Wales as the afternoon goes on for some heavy rain and some low cloud, preceded by snow, but then those temperatures will lift. Winds will strengthen, becoming gale or even severe gale force on the mountains before the end of the day. Quite a tangled centre of low pressure then is across the northern half of the British Isles into Sunday. A cold front passing south-eastwards will give a zone of heavy rain, which will tend to break up across England and Wales. Showers will follow, some of those are fairly organised, but could be locally a bit hit and miss, just depending on a lull in the wind across Scotland, which will mean that if you do see any showers, they'll tend to move around quite slowly. Some snow and some hail coming down at times towards lower slopes. Risk of gale force winds, though, around the southern flank of the low, focused on Wales and perhaps the Lakes and Pennines. Watch your local details for that one for Sunday. All of that has been moved away as we go onwards into Monday, and a brief ridge of higher pressure builds overnight, which will give the risk of a widespread frost first thing on Monday morning into the valleys and the glens, before strengthening southwesterly comes in again and fronts move in from the Atlantic. Now the timing of this open to some question, but the idea basically of winds strengthening towards gale force across the western and northwestern highlands, perhaps a bit more widely later across the highlands as a whole, and that threat of lowering cloud and rain preceded by some upland snow moving in to northwest Scotland. Now that may not get as far anywhere beyond, say, the Great Glen, so eastern parts of the Highlands and further south across into England and Wales, most likely staying dry all the way through the day with high pressure hanging on here. Now pressure stays high toward the south, but still not quite exerting its influence far enough north to settle us down genuinely early in the new week, so there's still fronts off the Atlantic which are bothering us, with a zone of low cloud and areas of rain and drizzle and some hill snow across the Highlands, just depending on where the freezing levels have got to by this stage. Temperatures just tending to drop across northern Scotland behind that cold front. It's a front that's not really going anywhere. It's within fairly high pressure, so it shouldn't produce anything too heavy or prolonged in terms of rainfall, but it could still be persistent across western hills, all the way perhaps even as far from Snowdonia up to the Lakes and western Scotland, just depending on the exact positioning of that frontal zone. Still a breezy day with west or southwesterly winds, mild toward the south of the front, cooler than towards the north. And again, that front wriggling around, maybe not a particularly active feature, but one which still gives areas of rain and low cloud. Whether it's centred across the south of Scotland and northern England, as suggested here, well, that's open to question at this stage, but we've got that idea of still something of a front producing murky conditions and some rain for a time. Possibly showers toward the north of that in the northern side of the Highlands, coming in on that brisk westerly wind. Higher pressure, though, is still hanging on toward the south. So stay up to date with details basically. We won't try and get too clever at this stage for 4 or 5 days ahead. Now it looks as though sort of high pressure will do a bit of a reshuffling exercise into the middle of the week, with one zone of high pressure that will have dominated the southern half of Britain in the early part of the week being replaced by a high that starts to build more out over the Atlantic to our west, and complicated interactions going on, which means there's uncertainty in the forecast. It's looked for a while as though high pressure has been wanting to build, but we're just struggling to get it to genuinely get over the top of us. It looks as though the general pattern pulls round a north-westerly, perhaps even a northerly wind for a day or so in the second half of the week before the high that lies to the west of us eventually starts to take charge, and this is onwards toward the later part of the week, with that high shown here as building more extensively across the British Isles. So that suggestion of a pattern change is very much there as we go through the week ahead, taking a bit of time early on to get to that point, but by the later part of next week it may well be that high pressure is more extensive and things finally settle down for a run of quieter, drier days, but with some chilly temperatures. That northerly flow that has got into that high initially may just lead to a rather chilly few days with some hard overnight frosts in the valleys and the glens, and temperatures on the mountains staying around or below freezing point with that sort of pattern. Bit of daytime lifting given any sunshine, so some diurnal variations of temperatures would be found. Depends how far north that high centres itself. If it gets far enough north, we could even find something of an easterly wind, which would be an absolute rarity in many recent months starting to develop. We'll see how far that high does get then for next week. It does look as though we've finally got something of a change of pattern on the way into next week, so we'll stay up to date with things. I'll update the video early in the new week. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.